Hello, Texas Value supporters. I'm Mary Elizabeth Castle, Director of Government Relations for Texas Values, and welcome to the Texas Values Report. I'm glad that you're joining us, whether this is you're listening to us on the bridge or you're watching our Facebook Live on a Wednesday afternoon. We really appreciate you tuning in to what's happening in the great state of Texas as it relates to faith, family, and freedom. And we have a very interesting story to talk about today. We have an old but good friend of ours to discuss this controversy that was it an act of God or was it an act of vandalism? But who's to say? All we know is that there was something that was prohibiting free speech for college students, and at the end of the day, it seems like maybe it was an act of God. So we have a good friend with us, Dr. John Seago, president of Texas Right to Life. And many of you know John Seago. He's a good friend of ours, but you may also be associated with Texas Right to Life and know a lot about the good work that they do. They partnered with us on many good pieces of legislation like the Texas Heartbeat Law, amongst other pro-life laws. They're based out of Houston, but Dr. Seago spends a lot of time at the Austin Capitol with our team. So welcome, John. Thank you for coming on our show today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Mary Elizabeth. I'm happy to discuss this odd story with you.
Yeah, so like I said, sometimes we'll talk about policy issues. We've had a few radio shows that have been really policy heavy, talking about changes of Title IX or talking about different laws. I think this is a fun topic today because we're discussing an interesting story that broke last week. Some of you may have missed it, or you may have seen some gold figurines on our Facebook page and wondered what was that. But a satanic abortion idol seems to have lost her head, and by that I mean literally she lost her head. So Dr. John Seago knows a lot about this abortion statue. We brought this news to you back in February, I believe, where there was an abortion statue, an infamous one, coming from New York City. If anything can come good from New York City, we must have some doubt that if something's coming from New York City, it must not be good if it's coming to Texas. But this very infamous gold abortion statue, it's a golden figurine of a woman with some gold ram-like horns, with tentacle arms, and to add some light to it, she has a collar, just like Justice Ginsburg. And, this was supposed to represent, according to the artist, a response to Roe versus Wade being overturned. So it was very clear from the beginning that this statue represented abortion rights. But somehow this statue that was in front of a courthouse in New York City was coming to Texas, and out of all places coming to a Texas university, the University of Houston. So John, can you talk about what you know about how this statue got from the glorious city of New York City and somehow got to the great state of Texas on a college campus?
Yeah, this was obviously a huge surprise to a lot of our conservative groups, a lot of our elected officials who have ties to the University of Houston, and just students who had graduated from University of Houston and now are very pro-life and very active in the movement. And so you didn't mention it, but Jonathan Saenz, it was at University of Houston. So really disturbing to see the university partner with this artist who, in interviews and in documents about this project, was very clear about her intentions. But the university decided to host one of the statues that she made in this series that kind of focused, like you mentioned, on using satanic imagery and highlighting a kind of pro-abortion icon and really celebrating abortion. And this was really disturbing to us. At Texas Right to Life, we have a college scholarship program where we train and mentor students to be pro-life leaders on their college campus. And at University of Houston, there's one of these student pro-life groups, and they were very concerned about this development, right? They're there trying to talk about pro-life issues, trying to educate their classmates on the sanctity of life and the violence of abortion. And there, the university is partnering with this pro-abortion artist to celebrate abortion right there on their campus. And so The Cougs for Life is what they're called. Cougars being the mascot of University of Houston. The Cougs for Life, they actually put together a very peaceful rally. I know, Mary Elizabeth, you were there. I was there. It was a fantastic event where the community kind of came together to show this statue doesn't reflect their values. It doesn't reflect that. And there was some powerful stuff at that protest, but that really showed that this was a controversial step on behalf of the university. So that's kind of how this all started, like you said, back in February.
Yeah, very interesting story, and great that you brought up that very important fact that, our president and attorney Jonathan Saenz, when he was a law student at the University of Houston Law Center, he was actually a leader of a pro-life club, and they were trying to stop that pro-life club. So we know that they're no stranger at the University of Houston, sadly, to hampering the pro-life speech on campus. So very sad to see that they're continuing on that tradition, but in a grandiose way. It's one thing to stop the free speech of a pro-life group, but to say like, oh, well, let's have a statue representing abortion on the campus. And from what I understood from the president of Cougs for Life at that rally, it was kind of behind the students' back in a certain degree. So it's very interesting, and I'll get back to the Cougs for Life president's speech because it was very powerful. But can you describe this statue to our listeners? We are showing this on Facebook, and we've I described it a little bit earlier, but can you describe to our listeners who might be tuning in on the radio or iTunes kind of what this statue looks like and why, some people might call it, satanic in a way?
Yeah, so this was a large golden statue that this golden in color. It is a female figure, and she has a big dress under her that has some glass pieces on it and some metalworking. But when you get to the head of the female figure, it actually has horns, and the horns look like a ram. They look very like it's using satanic imagery. If we look at, the kind of statues that you see in the Satanic Temple, that has kind of been advocating for abortion over in New Mexico recently. It looks very similar to that. And then, as you mentioned, the arms are kind of tentacle-like. It's a very odd figure, but and then around the neck is kind of the collar that represents the kind of apparel of Justice Ginsburg, who was obviously a pro-abortion advocate and outspoken for against protecting the life of children through pro-life laws. And the artist was very clear in her imagery. She wanted to use satanic imagery. She talked about Satan. She talked about the fall in the garden, and how that story actually is told only from one perspective. And she thinks that Eve and Satan's rebellion against God needs to be retold from a different perspective. I mean, so it's really not too hard to find these quotes where you see, okay, this is a golden idol, this is a golden statue using satanic imagery to promote abortion. It's a not too deep of an assessment. Kind of reveals those values in this golden statue at the University of Houston.
You're right. It's pretty clear, that this statue must represent what the artist said it represented. But interesting enough, and I don't know if you read this New York Times article, but whenever the statue lost her head, mysteriously during a hurricane, the artist claimed, well, I feel like people misread me. She said, it really wasn't about abortion. It was just about women's liberation or women's bodies to a certain extent. But very interesting that she wanted to backtrack that thought, just in case it was bad luck or maybe an act of God that, it was beheaded. But very, very clear from the beginning that even from the artist's mouth and even from the statue itself, you could see what it represented. Now, you talked about the rally that happened in February, and we alerted a lot of our supporters about this rally. We kept them updated on what was happening. You were there. And it was something that Texas Right to Life, organized along with Students for Life. And there were quite a few. I don't know what number count you got, John, but there were quite a few students and members of the community. It wasn't a small group at all that came out, to protest the statue at that rally. What was the response from the student body, about the statue being on campus?
Yeah, like I mentioned, the pro-life group was very concerned. They were very disappointed in the university doing this. But yeah, as you mentioned, they had almost 400 people at the rally, the first rally that they had there, and they had
Oh,
multiple
wow.
rallies. But they had pro-life students from local universities come and show their support. They had the pro-life group there, kind of leading the way at the University of Houston. And then the most kind of impressive, kind of memorable response was from one of the students that spoke at the rally. And she, stood up on stage and told her personal testimony that just a few months before that rally, she herself kind of bought into the pro-abortion rhetoric and thought that an abortion was in her best interest. And she told her story for the first time publicly that she went out of state, had an abortion, and
Wow.
came back and realized that that was the worst mistake that she had ever made in her life. And that she deeply regretted it, and that she shouldn't have believed the lies of the pro abortion activists that were telling her this was a simple solution to all of her problems. And she is there at this rally with hundreds of people telling that. And then she said something that I'll never forget. She said, and this statue is a daily reminder of the worst decision I ever made in my life. When I
Oh,
have to
wow.
walk by this statue, my university is celebrating something that I am grieving.
Oh,
And it
wow.
just shows, I mean, the university is really not looking out for the well being of the students to be promoting abortion, to act like this is a solution to your problems and something to be celebrated. And I think that's why I'm very disappointed that the leaders of the University of Houston still have not responded to removing the statue from campus, which I think is was definitely necessary before this event, but at least listen to your students, at least listen to really what you're doing by celebrating abortion right there in the middle of campus.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, John. And I believe that testimony happened at the rally that I was in attendance to, and that was a powerful story. But when you think about it, when it comes to these ideologies that are always pushed on campus, whether it's abortion or something else, that's the thing. It's always about a political statement. It's always about an ideology and not really thinking about what's in the well being of the students. Um, to hear that, this statue is actually causing her, trauma, reminding her of something that's terrible. You would think that in this, era where schools are trying so much to say they care about student, mental health and well-being, that they wouldn't respond to that. And very interesting, you brought up how they haven't responded. We had that rally back in February. I've seen other things on social media about continued voices saying that they should take it down. It doesn't represent the students. Why haven't they responded? And have you heard of any other kind of reaction that the university has had to, the students speaking out against it?
No, I mean we're very disappointed in the university. They have really mishandled this from the beginning. Several months before it showed up on campus, the university leaders actually told some elected officials and some donors to the university that they were not going to bring the statue. So they announced the statue back in October, and then the university said, "Okay, we are not going to bring it to campus. It's not going to happen because we've heard from all these different interests." And then so a couple of months later, we get to early February, and all of a sudden, it's on campus.
Wow.
And so, our friends over at the Pastors Council, Texas Pastors Council, has a letter from the leadership of the University of Houston responding, saying, "Hey, we've changed our mind. We're not bringing this to campus." And then all of a sudden, they completely changed their mind and they're bringing it to campus without
Wow.
announcing. And they did cancel some events. They were planning to have a big unveiling event with a speech from the artist, and the University of Houston canceled that event back in February. So they, they're trying to back away a little bit, but still keeping the statue on campus, which was the big problem, right? That's where you're celebrating abortion, and so we're continuing to ask the university to remove the statue, and it seems like the artist doesn't want to remove it. That she wants it to stay there until the end of this year. That was planning to, even though, as you mentioned, it does not have its head anymore, but she wants it to be displayed like that to highlight how terrible pro-lifers are, accusing the pro-lifers is causing the vandalism. And that's one other thing, Mary Elizabeth, is that we were calling on the investigation, we were calling on security to kind of look into this issue and take it seriously, so there weren't any false accusations. Well, last night they did release a video. Unfortunately, they did release the video of someone climbing up on the statue and removing the head. And so it does look like it's an act of vandalism. Okay. And we obviously, completely condemn this kind of behavior. This is not the way. This is not the way to engage in this conversation. But we do see that the university has released some footage that does show someone climbing up on the statue and taking the head off right before the hurricane hit. And I think that's what's causing the artist and the university figuring out they still want to have this statue and celebrate abortion there at the University of Houston.
Wow, so that's breaking news. So if you weren't aware before, then you received this breaking news that's an update. Interesting enough, I like you said, we came out with a statement too, that we do not encourage any sort of vandalism or violence, and we always want people to be safe. We always want to address these issues in the public policy forum like you and I do, having those, civil discussions on this issue, and then caring for the people who have been, hurt and harmed by abortion. We would never, even though we're frustrated that that statue's there, we want the university to remove it, never would condone someone defacing or beheading this statue. But very interesting to learn. I mean, this statue is 18 feet tall, and you were there, so you saw like the body of water that's before it, even though there is a walkway. So pretty interesting that someone did scale it, was able to remove that very large head right before the hurricane. But I think, at the end of the day, kind of the point to it, and I am, disappointed that someone would act violently, period. But it is interesting, though, that, the news media was very specific about who they wanted to blame, for this beheading. Obviously it was a vandal, so that's correct to say, but, the fact that they did implicate Texas values and Texas right to life, in that suggestion, they said it might have been vandalized. By the way, Texas values and Texas right to life, have cause for its removal. And so, until we had further information like the video that you just described, it did seem a little, irresponsible in a sense, to quickly judge, two groups perhaps suggest that they were responsible, and then also, there was a hurricane, so, without us having that video and that information, and, with the hurricane happening, which, could have also removed the head as well. But now we know that that's not the case. It was just very interesting to see how the news media reacted. And, even if it was clear that, someone did scale that statue and remove it, the fact that the media, went to two established groups, it is very interesting. And, I think that definitely was an issue. The person who did this, they could be, pro-life or pro-abortion, or who knows. But at the end of the day, it does call into question, kind of the integrity of the journalism as well. And, they didn't say exactly like someone from Texas Values or John Seago did this, but, they did were creative in a way, in saying that. But, at the end of the day, your organization, my organization, we all believe that, there's a civil way to talk about these issues, to address these issues, and, talking to elected officials, talking to the university officials, saying, why hasn't something been done?
Well, and Mary Elizabeth, I'll just add is that, as pro-lifers and anyone on the conservative side, we're always going to be held to a higher standard.
Right.
And we're always going to be, like a very, kind of close look at our behavior and our rhetoric. And that's, nothing that we can just complain about. It's just the reality. And so, we do see, like last week, there was a presentation of to the military that accused pro-life groups of being domestic terrorists.
Oh,
Okay,
wow.
that domestic terrorism comes out of these pro-life groups, and I know our national groups had to respond to that. We saw, this accusation, this quick accusation against pro-lifers is very common in the media, and it's just something that we have to be aware of. Is that, like at that rally, for example, we were very clear that rally, the main purpose was to pray, that we were praying for the university leaders, we were praying for the community, and we were praying for the students, that they would not be that they would not believe the lies of the pro-abortion groups there on campus, that they would not, be deceived by celebrating abortion, which itself is a deadly act of violence. And so we had the Knights of Columbus at that rally that were carrying signs. We had a lot of faithful Catholics out there with us who were, had their prayer beads that were praying. It is very clear, if any of that media would have actually attended our event, they would have seen the tone was not to cause a riot, to cause vandalism. It was very much to pray for the community, pray for the university, and call our leaders to a higher standard. And so that was one thing that, I think is interesting. But you're absolutely right. Is we are constantly going to be accused of inciting this kind of vandalism or behavior, and we just have to be clear nonstop that we oppose the violence of abortion. We oppose the vandalism of pregnancy centers. We oppose the vandalism of any public, kind of piece of work, kind of work of art, or university campus. It's just not part of the pro-life movement's core values to approach something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. This brings in a larger question too of free speech rights on campus and just educating college students about the pro-life movement and educating them about the sanctity of life. And your organization does a lot with, scholarships and different educational programs. But you actually passed some interesting legislation last session that helps college students, facing the decision on whether or not to choose life for their child. Can you talk a little bit about those bills and some other efforts that you have for pro-life college students?
Yeah, so like you said, we're very invested in college campuses. We have our scholarship program where we give a scholarship to pro-life students, and then we train them and we mentor them to lead their pro-life student groups on campus. I was actually just speaking to a group of our scholar recipients on Monday who were at our office being trained for their week-long summer training. And these are great leaders to engage their campus, to do tabling where they're educating their classmates about pro-life issues. They're having pro-life movie nights. They're hosting debates where people can come hear kind of a discussion about the issues in a very civil way. These kind of, in some campuses, this is the only way a student may hear the pro-life message, is from a student group, right? Because they're not going to hear the pro-life message from the administration. They're not going to hear the pro-life message from their professors in most cases. And so this is really critical work. So we get a constant feedback loop of what's going on college campuses and how we can engage them. And we did hear from our students that there were some barriers, there were some problems that pregnant students were facing at their Texas universities. And so we said, okay, well, what can we do from the legislative side to help these college students overcome those barriers, continue their education, seek that career that they were seeking, that's going to be best for them, best for their family. And so we did pass some legislation that required kind of had some discrimination language in it, using Title IX of all things to talk about pregnant students cannot be discriminated against. And so if a student is asking for access to the lectures by Zoom or access to recorded lectures, well, if the university has already made that available for students who have COVID or have other reasons that they're not in class, then that should be extended to pregnant expecting students, right? And so just things like that to create a more pro-life environment. And now this has nothing to do with abortion, but this is pro-life in our opinion. This is building a pro-life culture. And there's a lot that we can do. We talked about, the materials in those clinics on college campuses. There was some legislation about making sure that they're receiving, kind of unbiased materials, unbiased kind of advertisements in those clinics, because we have seen and we've heard from students that Planned Parenthood and Lilith Fund and some of these other pro-abortion groups have their materials, have their posters in the on-campus clinic, which is actually run by the university. And so we kind of see these concerning trends. The biggest one, the last thing I'll mention, Mary Elizabeth, is that these abortion pill websites are targeting college campuses. And that is the most concerning trend that I want your audience to hear about, is that there are now illegal websites that are mailing abortion pills directly to women, directly to college students. And they are putting their advertisements up in Texas universities. So if you go to University of Houston's public restrooms, you will see a sticker that was stuck on the wall by a pro-abortion group that says, "Do you want to be unpregnant?" And it has a QR code. Or you may see another sticker that says, "Abortion pills available online right now," and it has the website there. This is how dedicated and how concerning the new pro-abortion groups are, is that they are promoting very dangerous medical activities here, is ordering pills online, taking them in the privacy of your dorm room. But that is how committed and creative the enemy is getting to promote abortion, even in a pro-life state like Texas.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, John. That's very helpful information, especially about the new frontier of how abortion is still, spreading, even in this post-Dobbs era. But thank you so much for being on our show, talking about a fun but interesting topic. And thank you so much for all the work that you do.
Yeah, well, thank you guys. We appreciate our partnership with Texas Values, and keep up the good work.
All right, thanks so much. Well, we're almost out of time for the show. Actually, we are out of time, but just a few more things. If you're watching by Facebook, check our website for many updates, many court victories on Title IX. We educated you about those last week. One of our videos on Facebook about the Title IX victories is getting a lot of hits, so continue to like and share that video, and definitely listen to more updates. Our President Jonathan Saenz is at the Republican National Convention this week. Look for more updates on that. Don't forget our policy forum on September 13th through 14th. Buy your tickets today. You don't want to miss this great event that so many people rave about every year. And let us continue to pray for our leaders and our potential leaders in this country. There's been some very scary things that have happened over the past week. It's more reason for us as Christians to just get together in unity and pray for protection, but also pray for peace in our country. Until next time, this has been the Texas Values Report with Mary Elizabeth Castle. Thank you so much for tuning in.